I'm coming to you from South Central Wisconsin, here on land seized from the Ho-Chunk people. And from this place, I'm just going to be talking a little bit about critique. Critique is a pretty useful tool in our field. We put our work out there for feedback, and the advice we get helps us learn new things, helps us grow and improve as designers. But like any tool, critique can be wielded for good or for ill. And for all of the growth that critique promotes in our community, I think it's also important to recognize that sometimes the way in which we offer our opinions on other people's work can do real harm to our colleagues or to our potential colleagues. Now, I've seen critique used to shame people, to gatekeep, to push them away from our community because they're judged to be doing things in the wrong manner. And I'm not here to give you a bunch of rules that say you have to critique in a certain way. Instead, I'm just going to share with you some of the ways I happen to think about critique, and you can take or leave them. But I hope you might find them valuable, as I do, in helping keep our critiques away from that toxic side of things and more toward the constructive side. That's all. And the first of those ways is I focus on listening first. When somebody comes to me and says, hey, what do you think about my map? And I try not to just jump in and say, well, I think you should change that typeface and you should use a different projection or color scheme or whatever. Instead, I might take some of those potential changes and turn them into questions and ask, well, why did you choose that particular projection? Can you tell me about what you were thinking, behind this color scheme or what have you? I want my advice to this person to be as relevant as possible. And to do that, I need some context. I need to know how the map got to be this way. Maybe this person is operating under certain constraints, for example. There's limitations of their data or restrictions put on them by a client for how the design has to look. And so that's good for me to know that there are certain things about this map that are that way for an important reason and can't be changed. Or maybe this person's goals are just very different than I had assumed for the project, and what's important to me isn't what's important to them, and maybe vice versa. So that's pretty useful to know before I give some feedback. Regardless of the situation, though, I just don't want to jump in and start offering my advice based on a bunch of assumptions about what's going on here. I need facts, and that comes from listening and asking questions. I think this can also create learning opportunities too. I could tell a student, hey, change the projection on your map. But they might just do that because I said so, not really understanding why. Whereas if I pick their brain first and say, well, tell me, what do you know about projections? What do you think? I might find some gaps in their knowledge, some opportunities to teach them something new. And I think that's true in any critique situation, not just with students. I think the more in general that I know about what this person is thinking and what they know and are trying to do, the better the chances are that when I give my feedback, I might potentially also be able to teach them something new as part of that process. This dialogue, this back and forth, and that's not practical in every critique situation. I understand that, but I think it's a really nice goal to aim for, because when you can get it going, you can get a lot more done together. Now, when I've listened and it's my turn to speak, the second thing is that I try and focus on using language that acknowledges my subjectivity. When we give people critique, it's very rooted in our personal opinion about what we think good design is and what our experiences are. But it doesn't take very much time looking around the community to realize that there's lots of different design opinions out there, and mine is not the only valid one. And so I just don't want to speak in a way that implies otherwise. And I said before, I don't want to just jump in and say, you should change this, you should use a different projection, whatever. And that's partly because I want to listen first, but also because, saying do this, change this, you should be like this, that's language that commands. It's language that tries to obligate people. And I don't want to kind of come in and arrogantly assume an authority for my opinion that suggests that it is the way that things must be done. It's just one of many. And so I want to highlight that when I speak. So I might say to somebody instead, in my opinion, I think it looks better if you change these colors, or have you thought about, using this particular layout design? Stuff like that, just that reminds them that these are options and this is my opinion among many. And as part of this, I'm not saying that we can't suggest to people ways to do things different, or that they shouldn't try what we are wanting them to do. That's fine. But what I'm really saying is just about the attitude and the approach that you come in with. You can come into a critique with language that commands people or with language that cooperates with them. So which do you want to do? And I think you're more likely to find success with the latter, in convincing people to do things the way you want them to be done and that you think is best. That's all. The third thing that I think about is motivation. I try and think about, what drives this critique, because we offer our advice and opinions because we want to be helpful to people. But and it's nice to see people grow and works improve. But also, sometimes we have more selfish motivations that trickle in. Sometimes we express our opinions because we want to show off to people, how smart or authoritative we are, or we want to entertain them or be paid attention to. And I speak from experience here. I used to run for quite a number of years a map critique blog called Cartastrophe, in which I would sort of rip maps from the internet and then sarcastically break down piece by piece every little thing this person did wrong, say how I could do it better. And I made that blog because I wanted people to pay attention to me. I was just starting out in the field, and I wanted to prove to myself and other people that I was smart and I was good at maps and that I could do it better than some other people. And it was ugly, and I'm sorry I did things that way. And it's gone now, but I bring it up because it's important to understand that these kind of motivations linger with us, I think. I think it's natural as a human being to feel the urge from time to time to make ourselves look good or get attention at the expense of somebody else. And this is where I think some of the potential toxicity can filter into our critiques, is through these selfish, ego-driven motivations. And it's something we're all susceptible to. I think it's an easy trap for anyone to fall into, of offering advice more for the benefit of our own ego than for the benefit of the person that we're supposedly talking to. And I've done it, and I'm sure many of us have done it. So it's just good to keep an eye on these kind of things, to make sure that it's not getting in the way of the potential good that we could be offering when we give our advice and critique to people. And it was one thing for me to run that critique blog when I was just starting out in the field. But if I were to do the exact same thing in the exact same way now, it's important to recognize that would be much, much worse, because I would be taking the experience and the influence I've accumulated over the years and really be using it to mock and to punch down against people who might have comparatively less. And that brings me to the fourth point, which is that it's important to recognize that critique takes place in a sort of social context, and it's influenced by that context. Critique is not just one person in a vacuum giving their humble opinion to another person in a vacuum. How that opinion is understood and the impact it has is very much influenced by, the status, the stature, the power, whatever you want to call it, of the person offering it. And, so as an example, let's say you really like somebody's work and you go and you praise them on social media, and that's great. But if that praise is also done in the context of being put in front of a large audience because you have a lot of followers on social media, then that can be career making for somebody. And you could be plucking somebody from obscurity and giving them new opportunities they never had before. So it wasn't just the opinion expressed, it was how many people paid attention to the opinion. That context mattered. Or maybe you're suggesting to somebody something they ought to change about their work, in your opinion, something you think will improve it. And maybe they don't entirely agree. They've got their own opinions about design, and they're tempted to engage in a dialogue with you about your differences. But maybe the context is that, you're an influential person at a company they might want to work at some point. So instead they say to themselves, I don't know if it's going to be good for my career to push back against this person, so I'm just going to shut up and tell them they're right. And that's not necessarily what you wanted to have happen, but it's the kind of thing that could happen. It's the kind of thing that does happen. And again, wasn't the specifics of the opinion that person expressed in their critique, it was the context in which it happened. So the bottom line is that a critique is never just about your opinion. There's always more going on. And I think we have sort of a responsibility to examine the context and think about what other impacts could our words have on people, and to approach that carefully. And also understand that you might have more influence than you think, because in the end, it's really about how many people pay attention to you or view you as an authority, not the extent to which you think you deserve to be viewed as an authority. Right? This is really something that people put on you. And, even if you think you're not that important, maybe look around a little bit and see, are people possibly paying attention to me more than I think? And what does that create for me as far as responsibility goes? So that's it. That's 4 things that I think about critique. And again, you can take or leave them, but regardless of what you do with them, I hope we'll all think from time to time about how to improve our critique practices, the same way we come to NACIS and we absorb tips on our design practices. And I think it's important because we do have a problem. I think it's important to recognize that our community is not always as welcoming a place as we would hope and promote it to be. And part of the problem, is sometimes the manner and the tone with which we offer our opinions on other people's work. I've seen so many people come forward in the last several months talking about how they don't feel comfortable sharing their work with the cartographic community much anymore because they're afraid of being publicly humiliated, of having their careers and reputations harmed, of being labeled a cartofail, which is a hashtag that circulates around on Twitter in which shame is doled out to people who don't do things in the right way. And so they've seen what happens to their colleagues and they withdraw. And just think about the damage that does. I mean, these are people who want to grow and improve. They want feedback and advice on their work, but they want constructive critique that's, with a helpful rather than a superior tone. But the pool of that is polluted sometimes by these selfish, gatekeeping, and ego-driven critiques. And so it's not safe for a lot of people to participate in. And I suspect that goes doubly for persons with marginalized identities whose careers are already more vulnerable. And so that's why this matters, because there's this hostility out there. And I'm not just talking about social media. I've seen this happen in one-on-one. It happens in classrooms sometimes. I've seen it in conference presentations even. And so it's good for us to think about how we can improve our practices and our communities and how we can help our colleagues improve theirs. And here I don't mean just, calling people out. If you see somebody mocking somebody else or, you're not happy with their tone, mocking them in turn is probably not going to get you very far, I don't think. So instead, I'd think back to the first couple of points I made about, engaging them in dialogue, asking them questions, expressing your opinion subjectively, and understanding that this is ongoing work. We always set goals of what we want to be, and we'll always kind of be working toward them. And, I gave you 4 ways I think about critique, but they're just goals. They're just things that I think about that I try and work toward, but I fall short from time to time. And that's going to be true with anybody. And regardless of the specific goals that you set for your critique practice and how you might want to improve it, the one last thing that I'd want to leave you with is a potential goal that maybe we can all agree on as a community is worth working toward. And that is, what I would like is when somebody receives feedback on their work from the cartographic community, I'd like them to walk away from that interaction not feeling shamed or lesser, but feeling empowered and feeling like this is a community that cares about them. But also, more importantly, feeling like this is a community to which they can belong. That's it. Thanks.